Right now, the United States and Iran are at war. Missiles, strikes on nuclear sites, a supreme leader dead, a region holding its breath, and almost nobody is asking the question that actually matters. How did we get here? The answer isn't complicated. It begins in one city, in one winter, 47 years ago, Tehran, 1979. A revolution succeeded that could very well have failed. And if it had, none of what you're watching on the news today would exist. To understand what was almost lost, you have to understand what Iran was like in 1978. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi had ruled for 35 years. His regime had a shadow, the Savak secret police. It filled prisons with poets and professors. But his white revolution had transformed the country at a speed that stunned the region. Women could vote, own property, initiate divorce. A nationwide literacy corps sent young teachers into villages that had never seen a textbook. Tehran was becoming the cultural capital of the Middle East, drawing architects, investors, and filmmakers from across the globe. Iran sat on the world's second-largest proven oil reserves. It was America's most critical ally in the Persian Gulf. The Shah saw himself as heir to Cyrus the Great, as the architect of a new Persian empire, secular and modern and powerful. But the revolution was real, and it was close. The Shah had moved too fast for the clerics and too slowly for the left. His security services had hurt too many people. By late 1978, millions flooded the streets. The mosques had become logistics networks. Ayatollah Khomeini was broadcasting his sermons from exile in Paris on cassette tapes that passed hand to hand through the bazaars. In our timeline, the Shah hesitates. He's ill. He's exhausted. He refuses to crack down hard despite his generals begging him to do so. By January 1979, he is on a plane. He never returns. In this timeline, one meeting goes differently. December 1978, the Royal Palace, Tehran. General Gholam Ali Ovaisi, also known as the Iron General, Tehran's military governor, lays a plan on the table. Full martial law, enforced this time without apology. Arrest the clerical leadership, block Khomeini's return, and flood the cities with troops. He has done the math. The army is still loyal. The American hardware is still operational. The opposition, for all its numbers, has no unified command structure outside the mosque network. Sever the mosques, and the revolution loses its spine. In our timeline, the Shah says no. Too much blood, he says. The Americans are ambivalent. He is sick and doesn't know it yet. He says no. In this alternate timeline, he says yes. The crackdown begins in the first days of January 1979. It is brutal. It is internationally condemned. Amnesty International releases reports that no one in the White House particularly acts on. There is blood on the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Mashhad. But by February, the Shah is still on his throne, and what was supposed to happen simply doesn't. The first thing that doesn't happen is the hostage crisis. 52 Americans are never taken from the embassy on Talagani Avenue. Jimmy Carter never spends 444 days watching his presidency dissolve on live television. The humiliation that hardens into a national crisis that poisons American foreign policy toward Iran for the decades to come never occurs. Without that crisis, Ronald Reagan's 1980 campaign loses one of its sharpest weapons. The election is closer. American politics forks. The second thing that doesn't happen is the Iran-Iraq War. Saddam Hussein invades Iran in September 1980 in our timeline for one simple reason. He sees an opportunity. The Shah's military has been gutted. The new theocratic government is internationally isolated and organizationally chaotic. The window is open. In this timeline, Saddam looks at his intelligence reports. He sees F-14 Tomcats. He sees intact armored divisions. He sees a Shah who just crushed a revolution and has American backing. He does not invade. 1 million people who died in 8 years of grinding warfare between Iran and Iraq simply don't die here. Cities that were bombed into rubble stay standing. An entire generation of young Iranian and Iraqi men come home from a war that never starts. Oil markets feel the difference immediately. The second oil shock of 1979, already unleashed by revolutionary chaos, doesn't fully materialize. Western economies take a smaller blow. The stagflation crisis of 1979 to 1982 is real, but shorter and milder. Japan also recovers faster. West Germany recovers faster. The United States recovers faster. This is the butterfly effect at industrial scale. By the mid-1980s, the divergence is rewriting the Middle East. The Iranian Revolution was not just a political event. It was proof of concept. It demonstrated that a modern, oil-rich state could be seized in the name of Islamic governance. That proof, and the revolutionary infrastructure Iran then exported across the region, is what doesn't exist in this timeline. Hezbollah is never founded. It was created in 1982 with direct Iranian money, training, and ideology, built specifically to extend the revolution's reach into Lebanon. Without that creation, Lebanon's civil war takes a different shape. The Beirut barracks bombings of 1983, which killed 241 American servicemen and 58 French paratroopers, may not happen. The United States does not retreat from Lebanon. The lesson drawn from this, that you can bomb America into withdrawal, is not learned by a generation of militants. Syria's calculations change. Israel's strategic environment shifts. The entire chessboard in the Middle East looks different. The Shah, chastened by how close he came to losing everything, undertakes real reforms through the 1980s. Not enough for his critics, the Savak persists. Political opposition remains dangerous. But economic liberalization expands. A genuine merchant class grows. By the late 1980s, reformist voices within the monarchy are gaining traction. Pressure from below, not revolutionary, but steady. Iran becomes a regional superpower straddling east and west, just as the Shah always claimed it would. It hosts American military bases. It competes with Saudi Arabia for influence in the Gulf, not as a revolutionary ideological rival, but as a secular monarchy with stronger cards. The Saudis, facing no existential threat from revolutionary Iran, feel less existential pressure themselves. The kingdom's massive post-1979 investment in exporting Wahhabist ideology abroad, funding madrasas from Indonesia to Nigeria, underwriting the most extreme currents in global Sunni Islam, that investment is smaller, less urgent. The ideology still exists, but its funding dries up by degrees. The effects compound across decades. Al-Qaeda's ideological foundation weakens. Osama bin Laden draws his recruits and his financing from a global ecosystem energized in part by the Iranian Revolution's proof that Islamist governance could seize a modern state. That proof doesn't exist here. The Afghan jihad against the Soviets still generates dangerous networks, but the broader current that would harden into 9/11 is running through narrower channels. Afghanistan is still invaded by the Soviet Union in December 1979. That's unchanged. But the American response is more calibrated, less frantic, less willing to arm any faction willing to fight Soviets regardless of ideology. The weapons pipeline to the Mujahideen exists, but it is smaller and more controlled. The Taliban's eventual rise is not inevitable in this timeline, not certain at least. The Soviet Union collapses anyway. The economic rot is structural, but it collapses into a slightly different world. One where American prestige in the Muslim world is higher, where the United States hasn't spent years humiliated by an Iranian theocracy, where the architecture of political Islam looks more like a contained movement and less like an approaching wave. By 1995, Iran has a population of 65 million, the world's fifth largest military budget, and is in preliminary talks about a formal trade partnership with the European community. It is not a democracy. It is not free by any Western standard. But it is not exporting revolution either. It is becoming, slowly and imperfectly, something that rhymes with normal. Now let's zoom out to today. Without the Iranian Revolution, the architecture of the modern Middle East is fundamentally different. The networks, ideologies, and state sponsors that eventually produce ISIS, which traces its lineage through Al-Qaeda, through the Afghan jihad, through a decades-long radicalization pipeline, those inputs are weakened at the source. ISIS, in my humble opinion, becomes far less likely, perhaps impossible in anything like the form it took. Imagine that. The United States, never humiliated by the hostage crisis, never struck in Beirut, never drawn into the Gulf as a permanent military presence in the same frantic way, might have avoided the foreign policy spiral that ends in Iraq in 2003. Might have. The pressure toward that war has other causes, but the regional architecture that made it feel necessary is different. Millions of people who died in the Iran-Iraq war, in Hezbollah operations, in the various proxy conflicts Iran funded across 4 decades, some of them are alive, or their children are, or the countries they would have destroyed are still standing. And the Iranian people themselves, the ones who wanted secular modernity and connection to the world, who instead got 40 years of theocratic rule and economic sanctions and international isolation, they got something else, not paradise. The Shah's Iran had real victims. Political reform under a surviving monarchy is slow and contested and never clean. But perhaps reform, perhaps the slow, uneven arc of institutional change instead of the absolute rupture of revolution followed by absolute suppression. History is never a clean either-or situation. The Shah's survival is not unambiguously better for every Iranian. That would be far too undercomplex. But the scale of what was lost in our timeline, in blood, in opportunity, in raw human possibility, is staggering to contemplate. One man's hesitation in December 1978, one general's proposal, accepted or rejected, a revolution that failed rather than succeeded. From that single pivot, an entirely different world unfolds. The Middle East reshaped, the Cold War's final chapter rewritten, the modern age arriving without some of its deepest wounds. History turns on moments like this, constantly, invisibly, without warning. The question it asks us is whether we can see those moments clearly enough before they become the past we can never change. What is your opinion on this alternate timeline unfolding? Tell us in the comments, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to dive into other alternate timelines we are going to dive into in the videos to come. Till then, stay curious.